Thank you so much, Mario, for sharing your beautiful talent with us today. Engaging in spiritual companioning can lead to serious life-changing results. Wow. So my purpose today is to support you in journeying with another to access your inner spiritual director. The human condition is that sometimes we just prefer to stay in our comfort zone, and we just don't want to go anywhere near that idea of stretching and growing spiritually. And the spiritual solution is dismantling our structures of knowing by stretching and growing spiritually, by diving more deeply into our spiritual journey. Now, before I go any further, I want to offer a clarification of terms, and two terms I'll be using interchangeably. After hundreds of years, what has always been called spiritual direction is shifting to being called spiritual companioning. So whether I say spiritual direction or spiritual companioning, I'm talking about the same thing. We're all just kind of getting used to this idea of spiritual companioning. So the Spiritual Directors International website states, a spiritual director is a type of spiritual companion. We believe the term companion is broader and more inclusive and points to the heart of our work, which is to walk alongside with others as friends, listening to and honoring the sacred stories being told. So, what is in it for you to engage in spiritual companioning? Well, maybe more than first meets the eye, because this is one of those good news, bad news messages. So I'll tell you the bad news first, with tongue in cheek. Caution, spiritual companioning may be hazardous to your comfort with how you do life. Because as I said in my opening statement, engaging in spiritual companioning can lead to serious life-changing results. So in a tongue-in-cheek article in Presence magazine, an international journal of spiritual direction, Joseph F. Coletti outlined the top 10 reasons to avoid spiritual direction. And this was written at a time when we were still using the term spiritual direction. So along the lines of David Letterman's top 10s, this is the top 10 reasons to avoid spiritual direction. Number 10, your spiritual director is not going to direct you. 9, spiritual direction is a journey, not a destination. 8, spiritual direction requires more discipline, focus, and attention to the world around you. Number 7, your reasons for doing things will change. Number 6, in spiritual direction, there are no answers, just more questions. Number 5, spiritual direction will lead to changes in your relationships. Number 4, after some initial progress, there may be a dark night of the soul. Number 3, your concept of God will change. Number 2, spiritual direction leads to a call to respond. And number 1, spiritual direction leads to personal change. And wow, you know, if we go back to that human condition, a lot of us want to avoid change at all costs. That's why we use a charge card, because if we use bills, we might get change back. Okay, so now the good news. The good news is that spiritual direction, spiritual companioning, may be the answer to any divine discontent you may be experiencing. And in Unity, we know divine discontent is the divine calling us to a higher level, the divine calling us to be all we can be. So when I talk about what spiritual direction is, I want to first talk about what it's not. Spiritual direction, spiritual companioning is not psychotherapy. It is not counseling, and it is not coaching. So what, you may ask, is it? But I want to distinguish it from counseling and psychotherapy first. A licensed clinical social worker, Ann Kangas, on her website says, the primary relationship in spiritual direction is between God and the directee, while in psychotherapy, the primary relationship is between the therapist and the client. In spiritual direction, we think of God as the true director or the sacred therapist within. Therapists are listening for the movements and patterns of the person. Spiritual directors are listening for the movements of God. So that's the distinction between spiritual direction, spiritual companioning, and therapy or counseling or even coaching. When I applied for a spiritual direction program in 2016, I was asked on the application form, define spiritual direction as you know it. And here's how I answered. A supportive, heart-centered method of calling forth divine guidance. I think of a spiritual director as a sacred space holder who helps others discern how God is showing up in their lives, who God would have them be, and what God would have them do. Well, it's been 2 years since I graduated and earned my certificate in spiritual direction, and I completely agree with how I defined it back then. But if you want another opinion, Wikipedia states, spiritual direction is the practice of being with people as they attempt to deepen their relationship with the divine or to learn and grow in their own personal spirituality. So spiritual companions, spiritual directors serve in many different roles, and here's a few of them. They serve in the role of supporting people on their spiritual journeys, welcoming and being present with those they companion, and listening and responding respectfully, being contemplative and honoring sacred silence as a spiritual practice and as part of the spiritual companioning process, hearing, seeing, and honoring the people they companion with, being intuitive spiritual friends, accountable and compassionate, hospitable and open, loving, yet independent. So spiritual companioning is an invitation to be open and receptive to the divine. It is a way to experience confidential, holy listening in an open and safe spiritual space. It's a place to explore what you want to explore when you are ready. It's all on your time frame. It's informal. In a given session, you may laugh, pray, cry, or be playful, or all of the above. In spiritual companioning, you can ask what you want from your spiritual companion and from the divine. You may share the stories of your spiritual journey. You will more clearly define yourself and deepen your relationship with the divine. You will be reminded of the hope and love that is always present. Spiritual companioning is a place to ponder questions that invite you to stretch and grow. It's a way to embrace and explore your own questions. You'll be introduced to experiential processes that take you deeper into your heart. You'll clarify your image of the divine. You'll examine turning points in your life. You'll identify what's important to you. You will contemplate points of transformation and celebrations in your life. You will be encouraged to take small and simple steps. And you will have a prayer partner and hold each other prayerfully in your hearts. So that's not only what it is, but what's in it for you. So where do we do spiritual direction? Well, the first place we do it, the most important place we do it, is in the heart. The true spiritual director or spiritual companion is the divine in the midst of you. It reminds me of a time many years ago when I thought I wanted a romantic relationship and I wanted it to be a holy relationship. And when I took it into prayer, I heard from the divine, with God as my perfect spiritual partner, all my relationships are holy. Wow. That's what it's like to have a spiritual companion, to have a holy relationship, an intimate relationship with that spiritual director that we call by many names right in the midst of us. The Christ of us, our Buddha nature, our Yahweh consciousness, our Allah consciousness, whatever we want to call it, that is our spiritual director. No person can direct us spiritually, even though they may go by the title spiritual director. What I think of if I think of my spiritual direction certificate is that I am here to guide you to your spiritual director in the midst of you. So geographically, how do we do, or where do we do spiritual direction? Well, before COVID-19 distancing restrictions, it was done in person. Nowadays, and even before, it's done via video conferencing or by telephone. Personally, my spiritual director, who I've been working with for the past several years, we do all of our spiritual direction by phone. And then I have had spiritual directees whom I've worked with on video conferencing. Everything's, with technology, all things are possible. So why are we as a spiritual community interested in spiritual direction and spiritual companioning and encouraging people to take part in it? Well, in our Unity Santa Fe Mission-Centered Partnership Initiative, spiritual companioning is a way to attain our goal of developing leaders in our community, spiritual leaders in our community, as we progress in the two movements of mission-centered partnership. The first movement is moving from a minister-focused ministry, in which the minister is the focal point of transmitting spiritual principles and practices, and moving to a mission-focused partnership where the community co-partners with the minister in transmitting spiritual principles and practices. And the second movement of mission-centered partnership is moving from egoic consciousness to Christ consciousness, from the non-duality of separation to knowing our oneness, which is so much of what happens in spiritual companioning. And there's a bit of problem in many ministries across denominations that results because often the focus is on introducing new people to the faith tradition's spiritual principles and practices. And this is an important focus that we want to continue. We want to make sure anyone that's new to Unity or new thought is welcomed and given the opportunity and given attention so that they can grow and learn what it is that we teach, these practical spiritual principles that make such a difference in our life. But that's not enough. There also needs to be a focus on providing opportunities for longer-term members of the community to explore spiritual principles and practices in services and small groups. And we're doing a great job of that at Unity Santa Fe. We have our soul circles, so many of our ministry teams. Those are really great ways to take it to the next level, to participate in a deeper level of partnership. And a number of years ago, I even offered a 2-year spiritual mastery program that gave participants a deeper and more intimate experience of shared spiritual journey. And we all loved it. We were trying to figure out, how do we continue this? And we caught a vision of raising the bar higher by supporting seasoned spiritual sojourners to dive even more deeply into the divine journey. And we discussed the idea of partnering relatively new members with longer-term members. And apparently the time was not right because we didn't have a training program to do that. And so the idea just wound up on a back burner. So today, our Mission Centered Partnership team believes that this is the time to take that idea off the back burner. And we believe that spiritual companioning is an important way to do that. Because engaging in spiritual companioning is a deeper commitment to your spiritual journey than just attending services and participating in small groups. Spiritual companioning is delving deeply into deliberate, conscious spiritual growth. I first engaged in spiritual direction, as it was called then, in 2005. And I engaged for a couple of years, and then for whatever reason, I let it go and began wandering in the desert on my own for another 10 years. And then I felt the call, again, that divine discontent of the divine calling me higher to be all I could be. And so I re-engaged in monthly spiritual direction in 2016, and I enrolled in a formal spiritual direction certificate program, which I completed in May of 2018. Now, at this point in the message, Reverend Kathleen had planned to share the cyber pulpit with me for a few minutes, but had an unexpected distraction, so she can't be with us today. But suffice it to say, she is passionate about spiritual direction, spiritual companioning, as evidenced by the fact that she has had, this is really impressive, she has had the same spiritual director for 25 years. So spiritual direction isn't something we outgrow. So we don't ever attain, get to a point where we can't be supported by a spiritual director. And then 10 years into that spiritual companioning, she was in seminary and she decided to specialize in spiritual direction and become a certified spiritual director. So she and I are both spiritual directors. And we also have another congregant and a member of our board of trustees who is a spiritual director, and that is Karen Reem Buchan. So how do we do this? How do we get out of our comfort zone and stretch ourselves to grow by engaging in spiritual companioning? Well, as always, first and foremost, prayer and meditation. Prayer and meditation to discern, to listen for that voice. Is that voice calling you to this at this time? Or are you just not quite ready for it yet? That comes from your personal spiritual director, the divine within you. And once you get into spiritual companioning, a very important component of it is prayer and meditation. In fact, I learned contemplative prayer from my first spiritual director in 2005. And in spiritual companioning, you learn to listen more attentively to the voice of the divine in discerning what is yours to do and who you are to be in a given situation. No limitations. Whatever's going on in your life, you learn to turn within to discern the highest and good for your next step. And then more where the rubber meets the road, practically, I invite you to experience spiritual companioning by engaging a professional spiritual companion. As I've said, Kathleen and I are both available to offer spiritual direction to a limited number of individuals one-on-one or in small groups. But you can also go to sdicompanions.org. That's SDI as in Spiritual Directors International, sdicompanions.org. And you can click on Find in the navigation bar, and you will be taken to a Find Your Spiritual Companion guide so that you can select from so very many of us. In fact, I understand with this new website, I need to go on and update my profile on that website. And although she's not currently available for spiritual companioning with others, Karen Reembuchen also, as I mentioned, has a certificate in spiritual direction. She is passionate about spiritual companioning and really looks forward to the opportunity to companion in person when we're out of this COVID situation. She's not wanting you to do it on Zoom or by phone, but certainly she's available if you have any questions and want to ask someone that is a layperson, because spiritual companioning is available. You can become a spiritual director, spiritual companion. You don't have to be ordained. You don't have to be a minister. Lay people are welcome into the training programs. So if you're already working with a spiritual companion, I invite you to consider enrolling in one of the many formal spiritual companioning certificate programs. And if this speaks to you, if the divine is calling you to this, you may be able to figure out if you're being called to this if you answer yes to these questions. Do you journey with others, walking alongside as a spiritual friend? Does your work require you to be present to people as a compassionate listener? Have you ever been identified as a compassionate listener? Do you encounter people in the depths of their being as they process big questions in their life? And do people naturally seek you out when they need to talk about things on their heart? I celebrate the awakening of the true spiritual director and companion in you as you say yes to moving out of your comfort zone by stretching and growing spiritually by engaging in spiritual companioning. And let's begin contemplating this idea by being one together in a sacred time of shared prayer. So just allow the sound of the singing bowl to bring you to this present moment. As you focus on the breath, allow each breath to support you in relaxing your body, quieting your mind, and opening your heart. As we listen, or as you listen to the words of the prayer of St. Francis, hearing these words as if spoken by you, to you, through my voice. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me bring love. Where there is offense, let me bring pardon. Where there is discord, let me bring union. Where there is error, let me bring truth. Where there is doubt, let me bring faith. Where there is despair, let me bring hope. Where there is darkness, let me bring light. Where there is sadness, let me bring joy. O Master, let me not seek as much to be consoled as to console. to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that one receives. It is in self-forgetting that one finds. It is in pardoning that one is pardoning. It is in dying that one is raised to eternal life. And now let's listen to the voice of the divine in our own individual hearts in the silence. And as we gently bring our attention back to this time and place, I invite you to silently say, "Thank you, divine I am, for the wisdom to weigh options, the strength to accept all possibilities, and the trust to follow your guidance so a holy outcome is guaranteed. Thank you, beloved oneness. Thank you, thank you, thank you that it is so, and so it is." I want to thank you, Mario, for allowing us to use your copyrighted original music via Facebook and Zoom. And thank you so much for joining us, and come back again next week.
Welcome.